Clarifications, Mr. Pritam Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, DPM, for the round-up speech on the motion. Just a quick point on the matter I brought up in my speech. I think, as I mentioned, COVID-19 was indeed an unprecedented crisis, and it would not be realistic to expect no mistakes or missteps by the government. That said, I maintain the position that we don't know what we don't know. We do not know what is stated in Mr. Ho's report and the AARs from the respective ministries, and it would be important, in my view, for Singaporeans to consider the details and the breadth of perspectives secured from all who participated in the various AARs. I hope this information can be made available to the public at some point, but this difference of opinion does not overshadow the Workers' Party's support for the motion.
Sir, I already explained just now, Mr. Peter Ho's report focused on lessons for Singapore in crisis management. It included details like the internal workings of the government, our crisis management structures, and these internal workings and crisis management structures are not just to deal with a pandemic. It also includes, the same structures are used for dealing with external security threats. And that's why we are unable to publish that part of the report for national security reasons. I'm sure everyone understands that. And then there are other parts of his report which went into commercial sensitivities. For example, how we leveraged on different partners, scrambled to get essential supplies, and managed our supply chains. That had some commercial sensitivities, and we can't reveal that. If we redact all of these sensitive materials, we will essentially end up with the lessons for the government which are already in the white paper. In fact, it will be a subset of the white paper because, as I explained just now, the white paper goes beyond Mr. Ho's report. It covers the lessons from the agency's after-action reviews, and it also covers the lessons learned after August 2021. So it is a fuller synthesis of all the lessons that we have learned from the last 3 years. So I hope everyone understands and can see that we have been upfront in doing this. We have maintained this approach in dealing with the crisis throughout the last 3 years, and we are continuing to do so in the white paper, which covers the lessons for the government. By all means, there can be debate on the lessons, on the recommendations. By all means, disagree with the lessons and the recommendations, have your own view. We are happy to hear the differences in views and to be better prepared. But I think it is quite uncalled for to suggest that there has been any withholding of information by the government in putting together this report. And I hope that Mr. Singh and the Workers' Party will live up to the ideals that he called for in upholding national unity when we deal with and learn from this pandemic.
Mr. Jaragam.
Thank you, Speaker. I have just one clarification for Minister Ong. In July 2021, I asked if the government could develop a COVID-19 risk index that aggregates indicators to provide guidance to policymakers on decisions to ease or tighten safe management measures. Minister Ong replied then that it would not be wise to define a definitive threshold for full reopening, and that it would not be very useful to devise an index to guide our public health actions. But just now, Minister Ong just announced that 4 public health situational tiers will be introduced as part of an amended Infectious Disease Act. Will objective thresholds and metrics be used to decide which situational tier we are in? And how does that differ from a risk index that relies on factors such as the number of daily infections, hospital capacity, and vaccination rates? Thank you.
So Mr. Giam actually raised 2 separate issues. I think most of our clinicians, public health experts will continue to maintain the view that an index, that somehow you put different ingredients into it, you come out, voila, one number, and use that to decide your policy, that will tie our hands. As we learned during COVID, it's so fluid, it keeps changing, there's so many facets, you need the flexibility to decide what best to do. Having said that, a separate issue is what I mentioned just now in reviewing the Act, the IDA, and even today, DOSCON, you have different tiers. Yeah, that is quite different from an index. In different tiers, you have a range of options, a range of public health options. So when you have a pathogen that is dangerous, you first decide which tier I'm at. And within that tier, what are the range of options? And then the range of options you mix and match depending on the characteristics of the pathogen. If it proves to be insufficient, then you upgrade and you explain to people why I need to upgrade my situational tier. And I think this is a lot more flexible. There is a framework, but a framework is not equal to an index.
Associate Professor James Lim.
Thank you, Speaker. And I likewise have a clarification as well as a question for Minister Ong. I believe that the Minister shared that we were among the first to pursue vaccines just after the UK, US, and Israel, is what I believe he said. And of course, not to take away from the hard and undeniably difficult work of the expert group on procurement, I believe our first vaccination occurred on December 30th, 2020. It was a nurse, I believe, a frontliner nurse. Based on a quick search, at the time, actually a large number of developed and emerging economies had already commenced their vaccination programs, many with mRNA vaccines. Switzerland did so in December 23rd, Spain, December 27th, Hungary, December 26th, Canada, December 14th. GCC countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE on 17th, 22nd, and 14th. Even developing countries like Mexico and Costa Rica and Serbia all rolled out before December 30th. So just to clarify, did our vaccination program commence substantially after we procured? And if so, why the delay? And to follow up on that, my question is that if the relatively slower rollout in the first months of the national vaccination program in January, February, March, and so on, was that due to a lack of vaccine supply? And if so, why was this a constraint if we had already secured the stock via advance purchase agreements?
Thank you for pointing that out. I think I stated wrongly. We are the first in Asia. You see, in Europe, they have the EU, and then in America, Pfizer is an American company. So, and they are big markets. They are in the front of the queue. Global South are very far down in the queue. Asia too. But due to the reasons and the decisions we made and the leverage, we leverage on relationships with the pharma companies, particularly EDB, we were able to be high up the queue, outside of the EU, outside of the Americas. So I think we were still very fast from that perspective. The members seem to suggest there's a gap between procurement and rollout. As I mentioned just now, we got our first batch of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine late in the year. I forgot which month, could be September or so. And then we roll out in December. First batch wasn't very much. It was 20, 30,000. And then later, weeks later, every week, more came. And when we have a sufficient volume, and during that time, we have to set up a whole new machinery to handle the vaccine. Remember, mRNA vaccine has an ultra cold chain. You have to maintain minus 70 degrees all the way to the vaccination center. Once you open, it has a limited lifespan. Within days, it's gone. And so within those days, you accept appointment and jab it into the arms of people. Which also explained why, one of the questions that Mr. Leon Pereira raised yesterday, why didn't we use GPs at that point? And that is one reason, because of ultra cold chain and the logistical challenges. So we had to set up dedicated vaccination facilities and then push it out. There is no reason for us to delay. Absolutely no reason. We are racing against time. We have danger at our doorstep. At the earliest possible juncture, we deliver the vaccine safely, efficiently, quickly to the arms of our people.
Ms. Hazel Poor.
I I thank the DPM for showing us the comparison with the other countries in terms of how our budget measures have benefited Singapore. But I think here we're not just comparing with other countries, but also we want to compare with ourselves, how we want to make sure that we deal with this better in future as compared to now. So it is in that spirit that I ask whether a review on each of the budget measures have been done or are they ongoing, and specifically in future responses, does the government still feel that giving grants to profitable companies is the way to go? Thank you.
So we have been reviewing. We've published, as I mentioned just now, a paper looking at the impact of our COVID measures. Ms. Phua may have seen it. If not, I would encourage her to look at the detailed studies which highlighted the outcomes we have achieved from our measures, including the job support scheme. So that's already been done. We will continue to review and we will continue to improve because we do want to do better. On the specific point that Ms. Phua raised, which is, can we put in place a criteria to give out help that would not allow for some recovery of the payments to profitable companies? I would put it this way. First of all, to do it ex post is not the right thing to do. That means we only wait until you know the results up later on. Then there will be a lot of uncertainty for companies. If you want to do that, you have to do it a priori, upfront. And then later on, if it exceeds a threshold, yes, you can claw back. In principle, in theory, yes, you can think of it like that. That's in theory possible, but I think in practice, it is not so straightforward. It is administratively going to be quite complex. It may lead to gaming by companies. It may lead to, how do you set the right threshold up front? It's not so straightforward either. And companies will start to game, businesses will start to game, all try to operate below the threshold. So while what she has highlighted is something that in theory can work, I think there are administrative complexities. But from MOF's perspective, we will continue to study and review because our interest is to continually make sure that we achieve value for money in what we spend.
Sorry, a bit of supplementary information for Professor James Lim. He mentioned several countries who roll out their vaccination program earlier than us. I should point out, many of them use non-mRNA vaccines, AstraZeneca and others. So we probably need some time, compile the data, then we know where we stand. But we were one of the first in Asia.
Associate Professor James Lim.
Just a very quick clarification. Those countries that I did mention all had mRNA vaccines. There were indeed other countries that had non-mRNA vaccines, but I didn't cite those.
Question is that this House expresses gratitude to all in Singapore who contributed to the nation's fight against COVID-19, affirms the government's effort to learn from the experiences of the last 3 years, and to that end, endorses Paper Command 22 of 2023 on Singapore's response to COVID-19, lessons for the next pandemic. As many as of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.